Mixing the rage and the monstrosity that is the Hulk with the adamantium and the healing factor of Wolverine, you get Weapon H, and now we're going to talk about it. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is an irate review, where I go over a comic book, its story, its art, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something you should go back to the comic book shop for or not. Make sure you subscribe to get more of these every single week. The comic that I want to talk about right now is Weapon H #1. So we already saw Weapon H inside Weapon X, as well as Weapons of Mutant Destruction, which is a series that you can actually go check out on trade paperback. It should be coming out relatively soon, but this is the concoction, the combination of the powers of Hulk and the powers of Wolverine into a former special ops officer that has run away from the company that created him, and now he's on his own trying to protect his family. But what happens when he gets mixed up with Roxxon and the Wendigo? Looks like we're going to be starting this one off in classic style. Weapon H is a really interesting concept when it comes to Marvel because it was announced in New York Comic-Con after we had the Weapons of Mutant Destruction and the crossover between Incredible Hulk and Weapon X and all that kind of stuff, that they're like, you know what, we're going to take this Wolverine-Hulk hybrid and we're going to give it its own book, its own title. It's so popular that we're going to give it to you. So it's the real instance of them listening to their fans. But what do we get when we actually listen to our fans? First off, we start off with this character, Clay, who's the embodiment of Weapon H, when he's in his human form, and he's standing amongst all these other people that are day workers or things like that, so they hop into the back of the truck. He doesn't really want to communicate with them a lot. He is trying to stay as individualized as possible, trying to stay isolated. So he's not speaking Spanish, he's not speaking English, he's working his day, and then finally, when everything's all said and done, some people come to harass the guys that just work their honest day's wage, and then all of a sudden the snikt comes out, Weapon H starts decimating people, slicing up guns, there's blood all over the place, explosions, and then we get the backstory. We get the backstory of Weapon H. We know that Clay is an ex-military contractor that worked for Eagle Star. We know that he was basically turned over to Weapon X as punishment for betraying the people that are at Eagle Star, so you've got to question his morality, you've got to question his sensibilities. He's not a volunteer, he's not somebody that was captured, he was somebody that was betrayed by his own team. So then he became Weapon H, and Weapon H leaves him with Wolverine's healing factor, the strength and power of the Incredible Hulk, the adamantium in his skin, the blades that emerge from his hands. He is the Hulk converted into a weapon to be used as a military. However, he escaped from his facility, and now he's in Alaska. He's outside of the realm of where people live. However, that isn't true for long. Despite running away from a family, he sees a helicopter from Roxxon Corporation start landing in the isolated area. They set up camp. They're missing their food. They don't necessarily have their rations. They need all these kind of things, but they're not getting any signal. They need some sort of rescue. They need some help. So what he sees is, well, while he's trying to stay individualized, while he's trying to stay on his own, he sees a deer, he slices it up with his claws, leaving it to be consumed by these people from Roxxon that seem to be stranded as they're on this expedition. A few hours later, as the sun starts to crest over the Alaskan mountains, he's on the phone at the ranger station calling in the possible rescue that's necessary. However, these guys are on an expedition, so they're cooking up the deer meat even though it could be poisoned, quote unquote. They find their map, they head up into the mountains, into the wilderness. They're looking for some sort of archaeological site, some sort of inciting incident back in 1843. So when they actually find the site, of course, they see the human remains. They see the dilapidated shelter that was created back in the 1800s. And then in celebration, the leader of this expedition, the member of the Roxxon Corporation, pulls out some beef jerky. It's just like, hey, it's very special beef jerky. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, I'll take some of that. Well, what is it? It's like, it's human flesh. So I thought that was just like, the sinister nature of this man's motivations are ridiculous, because if he's eating human flesh, he's eating human flesh in an area where this kind of cursed sacred land in between these three trees is taken. He's obviously trying to incite an incident that's going to bring about somebody or something that we've seen before in comic books, and that happens to be the Wendigo. So the Wendigo, of course, appears when you've got a person that resorts to cannibalism on this kind of sacred or holy ground. So he just starts tearing people apart. The member of Roxxon Corporation that gave him the human flesh, it turns out to be a cyborg, a robot. As the now converted Wendigo starts hunting down the last member of the team, we see Weapon H jump into action. Blades just slicing across the Wendigo's face, full-on Grey Hulk style. With the protrusions of adamantium for his skin, the rage is overtaking both of them. The Wendigo is going to be fighting Weapon H, and then there's somebody that's watching. Somebody is watching this entire event, and it turns out to be Doctor Strange. He was trying to track down Wendigo, and he ended up with Weapon H. So is Doctor Strange going to be taking part in this situation? We're going to find out in issue #2, but that's not the end of this book. What we actually see is we see a little bit more backstory in Texas, and when we're talking about in Texas, we're talking about the wife of Clay. So the person that he's left behind, the children that he's left behind, she has to work her own individual day. She's having issues getting her military benefits, the last remnant of the man that she loved, the husband that she loved, the one that she cared about, that gave leave them 2 kids. So it's kind of like a saddening perspective because she's left here all alone. She's got 2 children that are, kind of rambunctious. They're feeling a little bit rebellious. They don't have that father figure to help support them, and they're just playing, they're just, playing swords, and it's just like, who taught you how to play like this? And the immediate response from both of them is daddy, and that just shows you the loss, the kind of cavity that is left by Clay's disappearance. Of course, Roxxon is following everything about Weapon H. They're seeing the footage of when he escaped. Dario Agger is going over everything. He sees the camera from the cyborg that was on this expedition in Alaska, sees that Weapon H saved this last remaining person in the expedition, and he determines that Weapon H has a moral compass, massive power, discipline of a military kind, and a moral compass, which makes him almost too good to be believed. He wants to know everything about him. He wants you to uncover every single rock. He wants to dive into the history of Weapon H to find out who he is. As we kind of jump back over to Clay's wife, we see a little bit more between her and her kids. We see more of her memories of her husband, Clay. And she heads over to Eagle Star in order to get the documents that's necessary in order for her benefits to be received. This is where she steals a confidential file from Eagle Star, and we don't necessarily know exactly what's going on with that, but we do know that she actually works at Roxxon. So she works for the people that are looking for her husband, and it turns out that her supervisor is actually one of the people that is meeting with Dario Agger and that is going to head up the actual search for Weapon H. And this is going to be interesting because it seems like the motivation isn't just to turn him into some sort of military device, a weapon that he can send into the battlefield. No, this is going to be dealing with something much deeper because Dario Agger is standing over a portal that's oozing some kind of essence that he obviously needs the tools and the skills as well as the durability, the strength, the power of Weapon H to really help succeed with. And his wife has just opened up the file to find out exactly what her husband was up to. And that's where we leave episode number 1. That's where we leave issue number 1, because this is not necessarily something that I was planning on picking up. Weapon H didn't really interest me that much. The idea of a hybrid between Hulk and Wolverine was something that I felt like I would have come up with as a 7-year-old. It's, everything a little kid wants. They want to have like, oh my god, it's the Hulk versus Wolverine. No, it's the Hulk as the Wolverine, massively strong and, like blades and sharp stuff. And it just seemed like a really comical experience. It didn't necessarily seem like a serious story that could be told. However, Greg Pak, who developed this, who came up with Planet Hulk, he did World War Hulk, he has his way around these massively powerful characters, really opens up with a relatively strong performance. It's enough to keep me around for the first story arc, and the art style isn't necessarily the strongest when it comes to these things. I feel like there's a little bit of rendering when it comes to Weapon H, when it comes to some of these scenes that leaves a little bit to be desired, but it's enough to keep me around with the book, at least for the first arc, to see where we kind of carry the story forward. Overall, it's not something I'd recommend for you guys. However, if you have even a modest sense of interest in Weapon H, I don't think that you're necessarily going to be disappointed, but I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.